Some coalition countries, in private conversations, say that plans to deploy peacekeeping forces on the territory of Ukraine may depend on Vladimir Putin's position. This was reported by Telegraph, citing its own sources. The publication notes that in the absence of Russia's consent, Moscow may declare any European troops to be legitimate targets. Let me remind you, the day before, Volodymyr Zelensky stated that Ukraine would like to see foreign troops closer to the front line, because, I quote, their presence in Lviv is not needed. Political scientist Oleg Lesnoy joins us. Oleg, good morning.
Good morning.
If the European Union is no longer considering transferring frozen Russian assets to Ukraine, in your opinion, what does this mean in terms of political logic? Is it strategic legal caution or fear?
I think it's a cocktail of both. There are elements of both fear and certain legal considerations, since we see that there wasn't enough political will on this issue, and that's disappointing because in the current discourse it's mostly only Ukraine that is talking about punishing the Russian Federation in one form or another for what it is doing on our territory, for once again launching an aggressive war against the sovereign state of Ukraine. So this plays into their hands. They wanted to do this directly. The Europeans probably didn't want to, but in this way they played into Putin's hands, who pushed through by all means possible, through intimidation, through his Trojan horses. He pushed this issue so that under no circumstances would the problem be moved from its place. We see that one way or another he achieved his goal. And this is, let's say, in my opinion, unacceptable in the current situation. But we have what we have. Unfortunately, so,
in your opinion, what signal does this send? Does such a position of the European Union send a signal to Russia regarding its desire to continue its full-scale aggression against Ukraine?
A signal that Europe is weak, that it is not ready to take tough measures. And this encourages Putin to raise the stakes and continue the war, because what he was afraid of, he was very afraid of it, by the way. He invested a lot of both media and, as I understand it, material resources to make sure this issue would not happen. And once again, I find myself forced to repeat, if this action was not taken by him directly, then it certainly happened under his intense personal pressure, because otherwise this simply would not have occurred at all.
At the same time, the European Union continues to put pressure on Russia through other mechanisms, in particular by constantly introducing new sanctions. In your opinion, how effective is this tool in terms of ultimately forcing Russia to reconsider its positions?
Well, it's obvious that sanctions are something that work in the long term. They don't have an immediate effect. But when we look at which sanctions are being imposed, then yes, this is a positive step. It's necessary to do, but the delays with each package show that the European Union hasn't been effective. There are no mechanisms for, if not a rapid, then at least a fairly prompt response to various challenges. And now we see this with both Hungary and Slovakia. Once again, we haven't received this package. In other words, Russia hasn't received this package. Sanctions against it. And this shows that there is a need, something Ukrainian experts have been shouting about for years now, to change the regulations, to restructure all international organizations and alliances, to put them on a new track, to rearrange them. Because if we keep going down the old path, we could end up at World War III in no time.
Volodymyr Zelensky says that today Ukraine, the United States and Russia are working on creating the conditions that would make a meeting between the leaders of the three countries possible. The purpose is to discuss issues that lower-level delegations have been unable to resolve. But in your opinion, can such a negotiation format lead to any significant progress in the negotiation process?
For me, this is a very powerful step on Ukraine's part. I think that our president clearly understands that Putin cannot meet with him because he has trapped himself by claiming that Zelensky is illegitimate, that some kind of junta came to power or something like that, and so on. And he has created within Russia an image of Ukraine in its current form as one with whom it is impossible to talk. And of course, we understand this perfectly well. But we also understand Trump's desire to hold this meeting anyway, so in this way we are putting pressure on the Russian Federation. So we say, no problem, we are ready at the leaders level to discuss those issues that cannot be resolved at the working group level. And now the ball is in Putin's court. He will have to do something. He has repeatedly avoided this meeting, but such a situation may arise. And the stars may align in such a way that Trump will want this meeting and will put pressure not on us, because we agree. Except for Moscow, we are even ready to meet with Putin in Minsk. But as for Putin, it will be interesting to see how he behaves then and how he will react to a refusal from Trump.
How likely is the scenario that nothing will happen, because the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has already directly appealed to Vladimir Putin, if you remember, to organize a meeting in Istanbul, stating that he was ready to come there without any preconditions and wait for Vladimir Putin at the location that would be designated for these negotiations. Putin did not come, and in my opinion, nothing has changed.
Nothing may happen unless it is a direct proposal from Trump. I'm outlining a scenario, of course. These are also fantasies on a political theme, since wherever Trump is, there is no stability. There can't be any real analysis. But let's imagine that Trump firmly proposes to Putin to meet at such and such a place, and it doesn't happen. Perhaps in this case, Trump might respond harshly. If it's something general, for example, a Ukrainian initiative that Trump supposedly supported, then it will be just like before. In other words, nothing.
The Kremlin's clear position regarding the terms it is willing to accept in the peace process could have influenced the coalition's initiative, those willing to deploy their own troops on Ukrainian territory. Volodymyr Zelensky stated that he would like these troops to be closer to the front line. But Telegram writes that behind the scenes, representatives of the coalition of the willing say they are concerned about Russian strikes against these forces if they are deployed on Ukrainian territory. And in your opinion, if the deployment of troops on Ukrainian territory by the coalition of the willing depends on the Kremlin's decision, doesn't that mean that despite the statements of European politicians, in essence, they are admitting that Russia has a veto over Ukraine's security architecture?
It does look exactly as you said. In other words, the countries that call themselves nations capable of taking some responsibility are waiting to see what Putin will say. This was obvious. By the way, from the very beginning, Ukraine's expert community said that the problem with the contingent would come down to what Putin wants or doesn't want. You see, that's exactly it. And oh, surprise, they hadn't heard before what Lavrov and Peskov were saying, that no troops should be on the territory of Ukraine, on its land. So you fully comprehend the reality that Putin will say no, and yet you keep on playing this dangerous game? But at the end of the day, being a soldier and being a target is normal. That is the very core foundation of the profession. The risk of the military profession is always being a target, a legitimate target for another soldier if they are in conflict. And here it's this very moment that people are afraid of. Yes, I will disappoint our partners. They are already targets of the Russian Federation, which mostly carries out hybrid attacks against them. Sometimes drones come in, sometimes missiles reach them, and it's not acknowledged that they were directly aimed there. The issue of war has already been set in motion. Even European intelligence agencies are giving their assessments. Some say 3, some say 5 years. But as I can't remember who said it, maybe Medvedev, Anushka has already spilled the oil, and this needs to be understood.
Please explain to me, how do you see the situation where, on the one hand, European leaders declare the impossibility of violating Ukraine's sovereignty, particularly as a result of negotiations and in general as a result of this war on the one hand. Then on the other hand, they talk about depending on the Kremlin's position regarding the deployment of its troops on Ukrainian territory. How does this logic work?
It works the same way as communicating with the United States. Here, we are tough. Here we listen. Here we understand that there is international law. Here we understand that without Putin, none of this will work. And the problem is that our partners do not have a unified opinion. First of all, to become allies, we don't have allies. Russia does. An ally is someone who fights alongside you. North Korea is fighting alongside Russian soldiers. That's an ally. Everyone else is just a partner. So there is no unified opinion on what to do with Russia. They listen to it, but it is a criminal. He is punished. He is listened to before the verdict when he defends himself, his lawyers, everything. But here, he is considered a full-fledged player who has the right to vote. Are you serious? I mean, if you translate it into money and people, the whole world is much bigger than the Russian Federation. And you are afraid of just one such maniac? Well, then the question of war on their territory is simply a matter of time. And it is much closer than their intelligence agencies are painting it.
At the same time, European periodicals are talking about the desire to play an equal role, let's put it that way, with other participants in the negotiation process in shaping the outlines that will take shape. Peace in Ukraine after the end of the active phase of hostilities. In your opinion, this position, here we started with the fact that they have temporarily or permanently postponed the issue of transferring frozen Russian assets to Ukraine. We are talking about the fact that the coalition of the willing, their willingness to support Ukraine depends on the position of the Russian Federation. How does all this affect the prospects for implementation? This European aspiration to be an equal, fully fledged participant in the negotiation process?
We need to distinguish. Europe is not monolithic. There are ugly ducklings, like Hungary. There are those who are moderate. There are those who are truly ready for war because they are either already under threat or very close to it, at the borders of war. And whoever prevails in this situation will respond accordingly. Europe. There is no other option. The realization that war, it's already close, already at the doorstep. This realization does not exist across all of Europe, only in some of its representatives. And as long as this remains the case, as long as we see such a position, Europe will be weak and it will be harder to fully get to the negotiating table. Because Trump will say that you are weaklings and there's no place for weaklings here. That's what he keeps telling them all the time. You have to become strong and aggressive.